Welcome to Sports Talk Live Plus. I'm Sports Director John Scott, joined as always by the Hall of Famer ×2, Vic Carucci here. Bills hosting the Buccaneers Sunday afternoon at 1. We'll get into the game, Vic, here, because it's a pretty big one, even though it's out of conference and not really the teams we're used to talking about.
Right. No, I think it's big because of the situation, the Bills in which they find themselves. And this isn't where I expect them to be. I'm pretty sure it's not where you expect them to be. I'm pretty sure whoever's watching us right now didn't expect it either if they're fans of this team, because that's what happens. And put aside, we're not going to put it aside, but put aside just for a moment how bad the Miami performance was. It was before then that this thing started to get off track.
100%. We'll get into the matchup, including thoughts from a Bucs beat reporter. But first, holy moly, a 14-person injury report here. But it's actually remarkably encouraging at this point. Everyone but 4 people were limited or not practicing on Wednesday. Everyone except for 4 today was a full participant. No Dalton Kincaid for a second straight day. We kind of knew this. Sean McDermott saying at the beginning of the week he's week to week with that hamstring injury.
Right.
Khalil Shakir, Cam Lewis limited. Everybody else is full. And I think we should focus on if you're probably not going to have Dalton Kincaid, and I don't know if you're going to have Khalil Shakir, what in the world does that mean for a passing attack already under fire?
It is bad news. It's the worst possible news given the state of this receiving core. And when we're ranking the receiving core as it is, I mean, you've got obviously Dalton Kincaid at the top, but this, we're looking at Christian Benford now, but you go Kincaid and then you go Shakir as the two credible targets that Josh Allen has, and pretty much everybody else is everybody else. So if you're missing those two, and you're a team that's trying to repair its passing game, that knows that is the biggest, one of the bigger problems of the problems that we've seen surface, again, before the Miami game, but they were exacerbated in that game. If they're missing those two guys and against a pretty darn good Tampa Bay defense, this is bad news, John.
It is. So now we're looking at the good news, though.
Yeah.
The Christian Benfords, Terrell Bernard, Taron Johnson, Joey Bosa, a lot of guys we have not seen and have been out. You talk about the passing game. Josh Palmer right here. These guys seem to be trending towards returning. What sort of an impact can, especially maybe on the defensive side, but a guy like Palmer offensively, make to this team just by simply being back on the field?
Yeah, well, let's start with Palmer just because, again, the passing game being what it is or hasn't been, and waiting for somebody else to enter that conversation, just as I said. So is that Josh Palmer? From the very beginning of the season or from the moment he was signed, that was the expectation. Defensively, I think it is very good news for a team that struggled, even though you could say the defense wasn't the worst part of what happened against Miami. It still wasn't good. Mm-hmm. And you're facing a Tampa team that, and we're going to get into, I know more of details about them, but they have had issues with health up front. Baker Mayfield's health hasn't been the best. Their running back health hasn't been the best. And maybe this is a time getting healthier on the defensive front for Buffalo is good timing.
It just slots everyone back to where they more naturally should be. Max Harrison encouraging. We'll see maybe if Tre'Davious White and him go back into a timeshare, if Christian Benford is there. I like Cam Lewis. I think he's a solid player in the slot, but he's not Taron Johnson. And then the linebacking group, Terrell Bernard, clearly he's working his way back, not playing up to the caliber we're used to. So Shaq Thompson and even Dorian Williams being both available here to combat maybe different packages and give different looks of the linebacker group. And A.J. Epinesa, and maybe T.J. Sanders. You're just stacking the deck better and more encouraging in an advantageous spot for a team.
Right, and I'm not trying to pour cold water on anything here, but we are working from an injury list that, we saw, and I don't want to overstate this or even poke fun at it, but you kind of, when you and I were preparing the show, it was almost miraculous, the numbers of players who went from limited to full in practice. And I still say, gauge what is exactly, what does that mean exactly? It means, okay, the report says full participants. How do their bodies feel at this point? We are going into week number 11 of the season. no one is really feeling great. You could say pretty confidently throughout the entire NFL. And, you know, from people to go from limited to full just in a day's time, I don't know that they went home and, oh, man, I'm feeling wonderful and really, you know, great to do this. I have no idea, but it just is something to monitor here in terms of just what is their state of play physically when they hit the field.
On the flip side, maybe they could have gone against Miami if it wasn't Miami, and maybe they are just ahead of things there as well. Something to think of. Bills adding a wide receiver, not certainly at the level that anyone was really thinking or hoping. Mecole Hardman joining the Bills practice squad this week. Obviously, we know him from the Chiefs. He had some big plays against the Bills in some of those playoff losses. Vic, how realistic, though, is it to have any sort of expectations that Mecole Hardman can make an impact on a receiving group that needs help?
Yeah, I'm going to have to see it to believe it. I'm not going to declare that this makes an immediate difference for this football team, but anyone can be helpful just because of how bad it is. So that's not really the compliment that for Mecole Hardman or for the decision to bring him aboard, but I do get it. You've got to have someone, and does he have some pedigree? Sure, with the Chiefs and in earlier times of his career and working with Patrick Mahomes and in Andy Reid's offense. Is he coming into a great passing game in conceptually, or even with the way the quarterback's playing? Josh Allen is out of the MVP conversation right now, and rightfully so. Patrick Mahomes is more in it than he is, and it's not like Patrick Mahomes has had from start to the current place a great season, but he's had more moments, more positive moments than number 17 of the Bills has.
I think the return game, which is a lot of the video you're about to see here, is maybe where he has the biggest impact. Brandon Codrington, a healthy scratch more times than not, and really it's been underwhelming kick and punt returning. The guy was an all-pro years ago, and speed, which is something that they lack, even though he plays the same position as over half of the receiving group that they currently have. Now let's turn our attention to the Bills matchup with the Bucs. Battle of two of the top 10 picks in that 2018 draft. We're going to look back at that one and say, yeah, it was as touted as people said. We know Baker Mayfield went first overall, Josh Allen to the Bills later in the top 10. Mayfield's journey, different than Allen's. Allen was a little more of a traditional rise. Baker's going all over the place, but eventually in Tampa, he's a really good quarterback.
He is a really good quarterback, has been for them to go from Tom Brady to Baker Mayfield and the success that he's had. And so much of it, it certainly shows in the numbers that he has produced with his arm and his athleticism in the pocket, but it's his will. It's the attitude of the guy that I think has been so infectious to that entire team. His teammates love him, and his story is remarkable because, again, it starts off in Cleveland where he was considered this overhyped and underperforming player, and that was accurate. That's exactly what he was. But then I'm going to say reinvents himself. I'm not so sure, and he has made fun of it, that he's a very different guy than he was when he came in the league. But when you're bouncing around and you're on your what is his third, whatever team it was, fourth team for him, and getting traction, doing things that show up in win-loss column, and you have the respect of your teammates and your coaches and your front office. Yeah, it's quite a thing. It's quite a rise of his career. And I know a lot of conversation happened with Josh Allen with the media this week about their friendship, playing golf together, being competitors together.
And Sean McDermott really going out of his way to hype up the way he loves the attitude and moxie that Mayfield has. What also helps Baker Mayfield, great coaching, organizational stability, and the guys that are surrounding you who are catching passes here.
Right.
This year for Tampa, maybe more of a surprise. Emeka Egbuka, the Offensive Rookie of the Year frontrunner, is leading the way because the two names you're used to, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, battling injuries. Now, Godwin surprisingly limited both of these days this week. He hasn't played all season, coming back from a really tough ankle injury. But Egbuka is the star of the show, and someone that if you talk about Christian Benford returning or even Max Hairston getting tested at some point, This guy's a big play threat and can do it all.
He can. It'll be interesting to see how much he will be able to do Sunday. Baker, speaking of health issues, Baker Mayfield's been a beat-up guy, and he's playing behind a beat-up offensive line, which I think has resulted in a lot of the hits that he has taken. And I think his ability to kind of move away from pressure and do some things has been compromised. And then the question will be, can he deliver the ball to this guy or his other targets, to Ibuka, other targets that he has on this team, work with his running backs. I think the other key for Baker Mayfield, as is true with, I think, Josh Allen and other top quarterbacks in this league, is balance, and they've had that in their offense.
100%. Kate Otten, tight end, just someone to keep an eye on. You talk about the running game here and another injury. Bucky Irving hasn't played since the end of September, logging back-to-back limited practices himself. This would be a huge boost for a running game.
Right.
That's all right. Rashad White, fine, filling in, more of a pass catcher than a runner. Sean Tucker, some of you Syracuse people might remember him starting to get run the last couple weeks. But if Irving can go, that changes the dynamic of how they can operate.
It really does. And look, if the Buccaneers are looking for a pathway to victory in a very tough place to play, Highmark Stadium, this is really going to be it. It's not necessarily going to come down, I don't think, to Baker Mayfield heroics, although it could certainly at the end when games are close. But the way games can be kept close and a team can stay in it is ball control, running the football, and I think that's the formula, at least offensively, that the Bucs are going to try.
We focus a lot on what the Bills' offense can't do, so Tampa's defense certainly a good place to go. And Todd Bowles is one of the best defensive minds in the game as the Bucs head coach here. Their overall numbers may not going to pop off the page here, middle of the pack or lower in a lot of categories here, but they're aggressive as heck.
They are, and he doesn't get enough credit for his genius as a defensive mind. Struggled as a head coach with the Jets, but he has come back strong with this Buccaneer team, and the defensive signature of this team is written Todd Bowles. And I'm telling you, he will do some things that will make it tough for Buffalo's offense. Just strategically, of course, you got to have players, Vita Vea, big people in the middle, linebacking play, Levante David. So all of those things have to add up, and it's a solid secondary, too.
It is. Antoine Winfield Jr., they got some others as well. Hassan Reddick hasn't practiced either day this week, so a name you may know that we may not see Sunday. So that's our thoughts here on the Bucs and the Bills. Let's hear from the other side. Coming up, Vic's chat with Rick Stroud from the Tampa Bay Times. You're watching Sports Talk Live Plus here on WGRZ Plus. Welcome back to Sports Talk Live Plus. It's time again to go over to the perspective from the opposing beat this week. Vic chatting with Rick Stroud of the Tampa Bay Times.
Yeah, Rick has been on the beat for a long time covering this team, does an amazing job of it. And when you have an opponent from the NFC, when the Bills are dealing with another conference opponent and a team you don't see a lot, the insights of someone who's around that team a lot and has been for years are pretty key. Let's give it a listen here. So, Rick, what is the state of this Buccaneer team after a real close competitive game, but a loss against the Patriots?
Yeah, well, right now, Vic, they're a beat-up football team. They kind of have been all year, especially on the offensive line. They lost another guy, Ben Bredesen, their guard, in this past game. And, I think Baker Mayfield is hurt, too. And I think some of the plays that he made earlier in the season with his feet, the last 3 games he hasn't had a rushing attempt. And he actually won some games by scrambling. So, when you take away Mike Evans, when you take away Chris Godwin, a Bucky Irving from this offense, that really, reduces your amount of scoring and production. And I think we've seen that. Now, defensively, until last week when they gave up 4 giant plays of over 50 yards, they had been kind of, helping the offense out with some turnovers, field position, things like that. But this is a team that's hoping that the cavalry comes somewhere down the line, but really playing the most difficult part of their schedule in these next 2-3 weeks.
And in terms of matching up with the Bills, I mean, the first place you would look, and there's a lot of places to look given how poorly the Bills played against Miami, but especially against the run defensively, they struggle. So do you see the Buccaneers being able to mount anything in that way?
Yeah, I think they'll definitely try to run the ball a little more consistently. They actually ran it well, last week against, a New England team that was number one against the rush. I think they ran for like 113 yards. They do it with a couple of backs. Rashad White has been kind of their bell cow with Bucky Irving out. He's a bigger back, not explosive, a really good receiver. But we saw more and more of Sean Tucker from Syracuse, who, when he's played, he's been very productive. I think he averaged close to 6 yards a carry last week. So I would definitely think that, getting some guys back healthy on the offensive line, and again, they're still down at guard, and really just trying to stay out of, third and longs and have some production on first down to protect Baker Mayfield, because, as I mentioned, he is not physically, as great as he has been. He's got a knee injury. He's got an oblique injury. His completion percentage is down. So the more they can run the football, I think any team that looks at the Bills right now is going to try to do that, and they'll try to do that as well.
Speaking of Baker, even the beat-up version, there is that innate ability he has, of course, to kind of lift his team and do those heroic things that he does. Is that still the guy you see even in his physical condition?
Yeah, no, his will and his leadership is what really changed, I think, the Bucs. To go from a Tom Brady to a Baker Mayfield. This was his, fourth team in about 18 months when he got here a few years ago. And he has elevated their play. Guys will really follow him. I think that this year he's cut down on the turnovers. He's been everything they could hope for. The problem is they haven't had much continuity. The last two offensive coordinators they had, in part because of his success, both got head coaching jobs. So I don't know if that's in the cards for Josh Grizzard, but they have a little bit of continuity between Josh, who was here last year, and Baker has played great. He won some games. He put this team on his back, in some the first four games, all fourth quarter comebacks, and they're inspired by him. He was disappointed last week. For the first time, he kind of spoke up in the locker room. He talks in the huddle, but not much in the locker room. And he just wanted to hold his guys accountable because they were making mental errors, and coming off the bye week really didn't have the energy they needed to play with. So he's been everything they could hope for. I think he's probably looking at a nice big contract. Still got one more year left on his deal that they guaranteed for next year, but certainly a guy that they're happy to have and go forward with.
I don't know if Todd Bowles gets enough credit for the defensive genius that he really is in putting together those plans. How do you see him scheming Josh Allen and this Bills offense?
Yeah, well, it's difficult. Josh is a unicorn in the sense that, he's so big and physical, and obviously he can make plays with his feet. He can extend plays and throw almost from any position. He uses all of the entire sidelines, as you know. So that'll be difficult. But what really separates Bowles is the various pressure packages that he comes up with. He can blitz from any angle. He uses his entire roster. I don't think they have a guy with more than 4 sacks, but heading into last week, I think they were tied for 5th in sacks with like 25. So they get it done with a bunch of different pressure packages. Whether they play off of him and play coverage a little bit, he will mix it up. But the number one thing with Todd has always been applying pressure. And if they can get him in some predictable passing downs in particular, I would expect him to come after Josh. But they haven't had a ton of success on guys that can also make plays with their feet. So this will be an interesting matchup for them. And I think the strength of their defense has been their secondary. They had some miscues last week with a rookie that they put in there, Benjamin Morrison. But for the most part, those guys with Antoine Winfield Jr., Tyke Smith, Jamel Dean, Zion McCallum, they've been really elite for them this year. And they'll try to mix and match and try to, give Josh a lot of different looks.
And we thank Rick Stroud for joining us. My biggest takeaway, John, is that this Bills defensive front, which again suddenly has more healthy bodies than we saw at the beginning of the week, has got to take this game over, has got to take advantage of a beat-up Tampa Bay offensive line. You heard Rick talk about it. And it's not just about making life miserable for Baker Mayfield. Don't let the running game, however, in whatever form it takes, Bucky Irving still not, whatever level he is percentage-wise, but I still say that it's got to be controlled there before anything else.
Sean McDermott hammering home again this week. Attitude that you play with, I think that's going to be a really big emphasis going into this one against the Bucs. Home stretch here as we might have the most interesting week yet to look at the AFC standings. Yeah, and the Bills looking up at this team right there. Vic and I get into that as we wrap things up here on Sports Talk Live Plus. Found a few minutes here on Sports Talk Live Plus, and we're going to get right into the current playoff standings here in the AFC because they're starting to look different than certainly we expected at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
And even in the past couple weeks. That Bills loss dropping them to the second wild card spot. Colts, Broncos, Pats all hanging tough at 8-2 at the top here. Steelers are fading. I think Baltimore is going to catch them in no time. Then you got the Jags, Chiefs, and Texans on the way up there as well, with the Jags in that final spot in the wild card. This is not what we expected, and it also, I think, as we push ahead here, Vic, to the Bills' remaining schedule, it really shows you the path that they have is not easy.
Not at all, and really whatever this team is going to be in the postseason in terms of its status is going to be defined in these upcoming games between now and that Patriot game especially. That's where it's a hard road, I think, with the vast majority of these teams, including the fact that they're on the road back-to-back and in there, right, with Houston and Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. So, nothing will be easy, including the Bengals, even though I'm not sure what they're where they're going to be. Joe
Burrow expected to be back.
Supposed to be back, but they were scoring with Joe Flacco, just for the record. But it'll be interesting. And then the Ravens, a rising team here in as we saw in those standings. And when I looked at those standings, I said everything we wrote about, or I wrote about and talked about, and we talked about preseason, what the league would look like. It's an upside down version of what we were.
It 100% is. With this stretch, the next 4 weeks or so, Texans, as you saw in the standings, they're one of the teams that the Bills may be needing to fight for to get in at one of those final two spots. Steelers, if they keep fading, the Bills already have the win over the Ravens, so now you're looking at the Steelers if they're in there as well. That all setting up to we understand the magnitude of the Patriots. And then, amazingly enough, the Eagles, the reigning Super Bowl champions, but you couldn't ask for two teams like the Browns and Jets that you'd rather have at the end of your season if you need to win those games to get in.
Yeah, that's where I think they are. And the Patriot game, is going to tell us if, in fact, this team is possibly playing for the division at that point, depending on what the Pats do. They play tonight, of course, against the Jets, but or just to, as we say, just to get into the postseason. A note on the Texans, C.J. Stroud missing the game this weekend with a concussion. Yeah,
everyone dealing with injuries. The Bills, though, looking on the up and up on that front. Bills, Buccaneers, Highmark Stadium, 1 o'clock. You don't get many of those, and there's not going to be many more at that stadium the rest of this season. Enjoy the game. For Vic, I'm John. We'll see you again next week here on Sports Talk Live Plus on WGRZ Plus.